Good morning. You're listening to Drinking Socially, the official Untappd podcast.
Your inside look into what's happening in the Untappd community and the world of beer.
I'm Jon, and it's that time of year again. I guess it always is. The clocks change depending on where you live. The weather changes. And I realize I've got a collection of hoodies sitting next to my cellar full of beer, which is actually just a closet with a door on it. More exciting than that, we've got Thanksgiving coming up here in the States, and it's a wonderful time for food and beer and traditions, and we're going to talk about some of those that are close to us here, and hopefully hear some from you as well.
And I'm Harrison, and I'm ready to eat. A few things make me happier than food, football, American football, and beer. And that's what this time of year is really all about in the States. We're going to talk about that a little bit today, kind of why those things are all awesome in case you don't share the same disposition as me yet. We'll try to get you there by the end of the episode. But first,
Drinking Socially is released every other Wednesday morning and can be found at podcast.untappd.com.
or wherever you listen to podcasts.
And the best, maybe not best, subjectively most fun part of every episode that I do with you, Harrison, is almost always the first beer we open.
You're right.
This one is a decent beginning.
Yeah.
Comes to us from an old friend of all of ours, Kyle Roderick.
That's right. The OG.
Kyle used to host the original, the OG host. He brought us this beer from the West Coast. Harrison, do you mind giving a rundown while I crack this open? We'll see if it's a gusher.
Yeah, right. I imagine. We'll see. Right. That's been a topic of discussion this week. Here we go. Relatively tame. A little bit, but there always is. There's always some excitement there. So we're drinking Recursion IPA from Bottle Logic Brewing on the good old West Coast. It's listed as an American style IPA, about 6.5%. No IBUs listed there, but their notes say it's a culmination of their Recursion experiment. This is the 9.0 recipe chosen as the best version of this West Coast IPA series. They were trying to kind of a couple different versions of this. And this was the 9th iteration, and I guess deemed as the one they enjoyed the most. So here we are getting to enjoy it as well. But it's going to be awesome. I'm pumped to get some Bottle Logic going.
This is, I think, is my first, maybe not my first. It's got to be one of my first Bottle Logic beers now that I've stumbled over that sentence. If I had any before, they were likely brought to me from Kyle Roderick, but I don't think I've ever checked into Bottle Logic before, and these guys are incredibly well celebrated.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely have you have tons of fanfare overall, and more than, for the brewery itself, more than 700,000 check-ins, which is pretty impressive. 10,000 this month as of recording today out of Anaheim, California. And yeah, certainly made a name for themselves since busting onto the scene with their impressive beers of all different styles, but definitely I'm known a lot for their IPAs. So this is going to be fun to be drinking a West Coast IPA from a West Coast brewery and a very awesome one at that. So let's do it. Cheers. Cheers. Man.
It smells floral and fruity on the nose. It smells like any IPA this day will.
Super nice. It's that dry finish that West Coast IPAs bring to the game that it's, I love. And it's not what you see every day, which I know we've said a lot when we talk about IPAs on here, but this is great. This is definitely the first time I've ever had Bottle Logic too. So fun to be checking it out. Pours kind of a nice kind of coppery to hayish, more like a hay color. You can see through it. It's not hazy at all. It's, got some kind of probably chill haze happening right now. But to the style, it looks great. It smells very fruity. Ooh.
The finish on it takes me back to the days when I would want an IPA and a big bowl of mac and cheese with butter. Like it's such a clean, dry finish. This just refreshes your palate every time you have one.
Right. That was kind of like, my early memories of drinking IPAs that had a ton of bitterness to them was you drink it and it would be super refreshing, and then it would finish like that dry kind of bitterness that we all know that made you want to drink another sip. And it was just like never-ending cycle of, ooh, I'm refreshed, but I need another drink. Refreshing for a moment, but there it is again. And you kind of I learned to love that whole kind of roller coaster. If you ever see me drinking an IPA, that's the conversation I'm having in my head. Till this day, probably, ooh, the bitterness, here it comes. But wait.
Let's go back for more in the beginning.
Exactly right.
The circle of life.
Again. Sure, something like that.
Yeah.
The circle of a West Coast IPA drinker. That's...
These guys, one of my favorite things as a longtime observer of Bottle Logic is their equal, maybe not equal, but equal attention or equal love of food as well.
Yeah.
It says right on the can here, this pairs well with grilled pork banh mi. Everything does.
Right.
But I'm not going to disagree. The fattiness of that grilled pork and coming back with a sip of this, I wish that I was there. A super impressive, from a culinary background, one thing that I respect and love Bottle Logic for is their website. They have a blog they keep up, and there's all kinds of food recipes that come from Chef Patrick Whitaker, who puts together these beautiful photos and pictures making bourbon pecan, toffee crunch, and coconut bonbons. And of course, they're designed to pair with or even sometimes include the beers that they make as well.
Yeah.
And I think that's great. It's a great part of, we're going to talk about tradition today, and how food and beer, those senses can tie so closely to memory.
Sure. Yeah. That's a big part of what we'll talk about today, kind of as we run through some of our favorite holiday traditions. I mean, this, again, super classic to the style. Very impressed with just how, balanced it is. It's definitely not overpoweringly bitter at all, but it's there. If I had to guess, it's probably about, and we will have this conversation someday, but probably about 65 or 70 IBUs or so. Yeah,
there was somebody on the Drinking Socially Facebook group that was talking about, I think it was in Italy or Singapore, they had their first IPA over 100 IBUs.
Right.
And I think it's a great point to make, Harrison. We should definitely,
we will.
Not that anybody knows the answer to IBUs maybe, but we can, I would love some light shed on it from a mustached man like yourself.
And we will. We'll do that someday, because it's a longer conversation that has some history to it. But for now, I mean, this is great, and yes, and always welcome the bitterness of the hop any day of the week. But I'm enjoying this too. And you're right, the can's great, cool, logos, cool artwork. I'm digging it all. I'm pumped we're getting to enjoy this.
In this beer itself, almost 7,000 check-ins, rating just about 4 bottle caps. It's available. I see it at some verified locations on Untappd in Arizona, a lot of California, of course. I see it being checked in all across California. I always like to go over when I'm looking at a beer on Untappd. First person that comes up is Kyle. He had it about a month ago, checking in at, I think probably somewhere out in Burbank, Kyle was, but a couple of friends from the Untappd group, a couple of my real life friends I see have been fortunate enough to have this beer as well. So that's really cool I love going through and seeing what people I know think about the same beer that I'm drinking, especially if it's been years ago too.
Right. And I do also like this idea that a lot of breweries have done in the past of kind of trying, whether it's a single hop IPA variation, or maybe you don't change the grain bill much, but the hop combos you change, or you try a single hop and try to hunt down maybe the best version of this beer based on changing the hops around. And that's something that tons of breweries have done this in the past, but it's always a cool thing to kind of have your fans be involved with, well, if we're going to name a beer Recursion, in this case, like this one is, let's try a couple of different versions of it and have some people try it and get some feedback from them to see what's getting them excited before we settle on what Recursion IPA is going to be. And that's what they've done here, and took at least 9 stabs at it, which is great. And all the while, getting to enjoy, and all the different versions of it looking through Untappd are all, people enjoy them, positive reviews across the board, which is kind of what we come to expect from these guys. But yeah, cool thing to really have them involved, your fans involved in this stuff as they you guys come to the conclusion together. And this is great. Love to try them all, but can't have everything, John. Where would you put it?
I'd argue it would have been easier maybe 5 or even 10 years ago, especially. But now I'm starting to sound like my father, where everything was easier back in the day, or harder depending on the story.
Right.
But this is one of the things I find myself saying a lot lately, especially doing this podcast with you and spending some real time just researching and looking at the beer industry and talking about it here with Harrison. If there's any black and white, true as the day is long thing I can say about the beer industry today, it's that if you like drinking beer, this is the best time to be alive.
The best time to be alive.
There's often posts we'll see people, especially in the Facebook group, traveling to Italy and Singapore, and people from Russia talking about drinking the same type of beers that we are here in North Carolina, and friends across the country, and I think it's a great time.
It is
to taste all these crazy concoctions.
Yeah, right. Not only just to taste it, but also to have kind of the internet exists where you can have ways, and there are companies out there that can get you beer that you can't walk down to your bottle shop and get, and in beer trades and all that cool stuff we've spoken about in the past. So you're right. It's a brave new world that is kind of wild and sometimes overwhelming to have a real bead on, really kind of find the pulse of it. There probably isn't one anymore. I mean, I think we've probably entered the point of fractured everything where, there is no predominant style. I mean, you could say New England IPA, but sours and Berliners and imperial stouts this time of year, like there's just so much out there for any palate, and then every brewery kind of doing it a little bit differently. It's it's pretty exciting. It's pretty cool.
That's a really good point to make. As we sit here, most of the beer I drink day to day comes from in or around North Carolina, and New England IPAs were really popular here, especially over the last year. But I'm drinking a West Coast IPA. And even, I mean, a lot of times I look at something and say that's purely marketing. But the differentiator between a West Coast IPA and a New England IPA is incredibly visible, especially if you are able to drink one right after another. There's no easier comparison before you realize those are two totally different tastes.
Yep. I've been doing that past couple of weekends, doing like a West Coast and New England and trying to see like what just testing my taste buds, kind of putting them through some Olympics there, some trials. And it's been fun to them side by side. Because they are very different, and yet still under that big old IPA umbrella keeps getting bigger every day. A lot of verified venues have this too, all over the place. Lots of them in California, but I'm seeing the Theodore in Phoenix, Arizona has it right now as well. Litchfield or Ground Control in Arizona, so that's pretty cool. Lots of check-ins. Has a few day ago. The most recent one is as we are recording this. That's awesome.
And Ground Control, I've never been there to Litchfield, Arizona. I only know them from Untappd. I have to assume their name comes from the fact that they're also really good at coffee.
Right. I'd be good.
They keep a pretty awesome beer menu. Just as I'm kind of cruising through it, I see Wren House from Arizona, Abnormal,
right?
A couple of Bottle Logics on there. One of the things I try and do often, especially when people ask me, like, I'm going to XYZ city, what type of things should I be looking for?
Yeah.
I mean, I'll go to Untappd and
Sure.
visit this brewery and that brewery because they have something really cool going on, and visit this tap house or bar, bottle shop because they have got a bunch of locals on tap.
Yeah. I've seen someone drinking this on the 12th of November in Holland, which is pretty cool. This same beer.
This beer in Holland?
Yeah, Holland.
That's awesome.
Definitely, he's got the picture of the can right there. Loving it. How about it? So that's what I'm saying. It's a big world, but it becomes a small world thanks to the internet.
So true. So true. I think most of my Untappd friends I've never actually had a pint with.
Right, in person, sure.
But I love. Most of us have drank very much the same
together.
beers. Yeah,
and I'll drink together every Friday and Saturday. I get to see that happen. in real time. It is. I know it goes without saying, but we do talk about it a lot. That is a cool part of this whole community. Is it does make the world a little bit smaller, connected we all are. Cool. But this is great. It's been I haven't had a West Coast. Well, I guess I've been having them on the weekends, but.
Haven't had West Coast today.
Haven't had one today yet, so this is good. Good it happened.
Coming up next, after this beer, we've got one from Innocent Gun.
Yeah, so we're switching things up too. I think the only other beers outside of the U.S. we've had were during the Oktoberfest episode, right? So far, am I right, John?
To my untrained memory, I'm trying to think through. I'm pretty sure they've been all U.S. made beers. Right. Some really hard to find. Some I'll never see again.
Yep.
Outside of Oktoberfest, I think this is our first trip across the pond.
Yeah.
And it's a beer like so many times I see beers on the shelf, and even if I haven't had them, you get comfortable seeing that beer where you just say, I've seen that many times before. But I was talking with Harrison about a dark beer to bring onto the show for this one.
Yeah.
Talking about traditions as well. And he kind of mentioned looking for these guys, and they got a really cool story as well. I can't believe anytime I think of a brewery from overseas, I always imagine that they've been brewing beer for hundreds and hundreds of years. These guys have been around for less than 20.
Right.
But I think one of the UK's premier barrel agers, they make a lot of beer.
They do. They put tons of stuff in barrels. That's kind of yes, outside of their original, which is a Scottish export ale, but a lot of rum finish things and oak IPAs and Irish whiskey finished beers. A lot of really cool stuff. The one we're having today, Kindred Spirits, is brewed with Tullamore Dew whiskey staves. The Tullamore Dew is an Irish whiskey. It's one that I love. Probably my favorite Irish whiskey, actually, if I'm being honest. So excited to try it for that alone, but also knowing these guys are experts with things that beer can be put in and added to and so on. Whiskey specifically, this is going to be probably, wow.
Yeah, pouring this into my glass, this is about 6.1% stout. It gives a beautiful, like, foam creamy head on the top, which I'm always excited to see. One of these days we're going to have to drink a Guinness on here. I wouldn't mind that either, but this pours beautifully. It looks great. You mentioned something, Harrison, as I'm letting this warm up in my hand, oak staves in this beer. So I always assume, like, barrel aged, it sits in a whiskey barrel for years and years.
Right. You don't really need to do that. Yeah, so even like homebrewers out there, you can go to your local homebrew shop or jump online and find a bigger one, online and get like oak chips or oak spires, and they can be from any kind of barrels, like rum ones, whiskey, bourbon, like whatever you want. And it's, so staves is when you look at a barrel, a wooden barrel, the wood part of that barrel, the little kind of plank-looking things are called staves. And you can take, when you take the steel bands off of it, they essentially come apart, and then they're just pieces of wood that have, and so what they do is they can chop it up and put it in the actual beer. So as it's fermenting in a tank, you have chunks of this barrel in there. So it's not like resting in the barrels. It's, as they say on the bottle, a stout matured with Irish whiskey barrel staves. So the actual barrel of the stout, or that the whiskey was in, is been added to this beer as its conditioning. So it doesn't like sit in it and therefore really impart as much alcohol as like dumping into a freshly emptied whiskey barrel would, but it does pull a lot of the flavor out of it, like kind of steeping
twice as much surface area, I guess, right?
Yeah, right. Steeping in that wood. But it's not something that you can, it's pretty accessible. I brewed a fair amount of beers just at home before I did this professionally with a lot of rum oak chips I used to use a lot. So so that's what this beer is doing, or that's what happened in this beer. And not aged in, but kind of matured with. And I don't know how long, but let's kind of take a taste and see what we can learn from this guy.
It sure does smell good. Like chocolate brownies on the nose.
And it tastes like it too. It's there is that little kind of tanniny wood note that grabs you in the back, But other than that, it's like this nice mellow coffee cake batter thing happening, which is great. And a really cool thing. This is not the only brewery that does this, but it's really cool to enjoy beers like this where it's a little more sessionable, like an 11 or 12% barrel aged beer, but you're still getting a lot of the flavor from whiskey barrels. Absolutely. But they do tons of stuff with barrels, man. I'm just looking at everything on Untappd, and it's all bourbon barrel porter, spiced rum aged porter. There's tons of stuff.
It's really cool. I'm looking on their brewery page on Untappd. Obviously, they've got their tap room set up in Edinburgh and Glasgow, but I see them getting checked in Florida, in Virginia, in Oklahoma. They're on tap in Philadelphia. They're they're all over. A great distribution for them.
Yeah, yep. And you do see them a lot, and they like John mentioned, haven't been around for a couple hundred years, but quickly established themselves, and they're almost up to 800,000 check-ins on Untappd, almost 5,000 this month alone. With some really cool beer that you don't see a lot of places making. They definitely don't shy away from barrels, which in this day and age is an exciting thing for sure. There's just so much possibility there when you introduce spirits and different kind of fermentation vessels or ways to approach maturing beer. That's where things get really interesting. I mean, a lot of people in this industry, a lot of brewers kind of believe that the cellar is where the beer is made and where all the mistakes can happen and where it's most important to kind of be on your game. So to be as experimental as they are there is it's cool, and to have as much success as they have with it. But this is great. I mean, 6% or 6.1%, tons of flavor, really nice mouthfeel too.
It doesn't carry that. I guess for like a really expensive barrel age, something that's sat around for a long time, the aging part I equate in my head as smooth in texture. And in this case, the staves, I assume, are more just to impart the flavor, which I think you nailed. You definitely get that kind of oaked, right on my first sip. I got that oaked flavor.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you get it each time you kind of finish up. And Tullamore Dew is such an awesome Irish whiskey as well.
That's a delicious beer, man.
Yeah, no, it really is. I'd love to have this with some Tullamore Dew.
There we go.
That would be,
infusion project. We'll get some
we're just next to it.
Tree branches and soak them in Tullamore Dew and stir around in the beer. We'll get there.
Put them in my water and then go home for the day.
Good amount of my Untappd friends list has actually had this particular beer from Innocent Gun, and I see a bunch of people that one really cool. I like. I love the puns. An Untappd friend of mine, Josh, checked into a beer from Innocent Gun that is called Frank and Sense, which is hard for me to say without kind of smiling. But I love the pun. They do some really cool, I guess, experimental stuff. I see mango IPA, and I think in their tap rooms as well, they've got some. They did a 0% lager.
All right,
Innocent None.
Right,
so just riding the pun game. But I think their experimentals are really cool. I love when I see a brewery that's kind of big across country distribution, and they're still going to make a bourbon barrel jalapeno stout and do some fun stuff like that as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty cool. And again, pretty unique, all this stuff that they're doing. And they call and refer to beer and whiskey as malt cousins on their website. They talk more about this beer, which I think is a cool way of looking at it. They have always paired well together. And Tullamore Dew did this awesome marketing campaign in Philadelphia where they had coasters that were shaped. It kind of looked like a snowman, where it's like a big part that the beer would fit on, and then attached to it was a smaller coaster for the Tullamore Dew shot to sit on. And it's a Dew and a Brew. And it was in like every bar, and it was like, yeah, I will have. That's the coaster in front of me, and it was like if you ordered a beer, it's this weird empty spot.
Shot of Tullamore Dew to go with it,
asking for the Dew to join the party. So that was, I remember that well.
It's a great marketing adventure.
Yeah, so this is not new territory for Tullamore Dew at all to be side or partnered up with some beer. So, and in my experience, a solid partnership, whether it's in the beer or next to it, every time I've experienced it. But this is great. Yeah, it's opening up nice. You're right. It's not huge. It's it's not 11%. It's 6%. It's got some nice body to it, but it's not that big maple syrup, kind of explosion that a lot of barrel aged beers are. It's definitely like I could just drink this quickly.
I purchased this in a 4-pack, and I could drink easily 3 of these in a sitting, which is a lot for me. I'm slower in my old age. But to get through 3 bourbony, I mean, these are just, as it warms up, I get a lot more vanilla.
Yeah, me too.
But not so much. I mean, we drank in the last episode, we drank that beer from Burial that was too big to fit on a Scrabble board. And that was amazing, but I couldn't, as amazing as it was, there's no way I could drink another one. Well, there's no way I could drink another one right after that. No. It would have been too much power for my palate.
Yes, it was a powerful episode that sent us to the Swiss Alps, if you remember. It took us all over the place.
Lots of waffles.
It was a great time.
This would pair just as well with anything that you're going to do. I mean, I could see this being a wonderful Thanksgiving beer, especially coming up around like pumpkin pie time.
Sure.
To kick off one of these. If you're like me, one of those people that tries to eat Thanksgiving dinner at 2:00 because you haven't eaten all day.
Yes.
So you try and get it out early, and you don't want to crush a 15% stout or start drinking Tullamore Dew at 2:00 and yelling at everybody.
Right.
Pace yourself with an innocent gun.
Right, there you go. Innocent gun, 2-in-1. Yeah, kindred spirits. But yeah, no, I totally agree. You're right. It's good. Pumpkin pie in this would be great.
Oh, amazing.
I'm just hungry.
I think the more we get into this season on the podcast, the more you're going to realize that Harrison and I love food probably just as much as we love beer.
Yep.
They all tie together in a love and hatred for American football.
Right.
But
right. Get deep into that today.
Yeah, definitely. We've got some. I mean, the idea of this episode coming out, this will be the last one we release before American Thanksgiving, which is really, I think, just in my eyes, almost one of the best holidays we have here in the States, because the way that I've always celebrated it is with loved ones. There's really not gifts involved. It's just food and company. And I think that's a holiday for me.
Yeah, right. Just sleep on a couch somewhere.
Yeah.
It's great. That's
some Burt Reynolds movie, a comfy couch cushion.
Right. It's usually Chevy Chase falling off a roof somewhere in the background. That's what occurs on our
preparing you for Christmas. And the older I get, the more Thanksgiving kind of shifts into my house. Growing up, it was always other people's houses. And I remember like not liking the stuffing or dressing, depending on where you're from, or wondering if there was going to be a bunch of raw onions on the plate, and just being scared as a child when you're afraid of raw onions. But the best part I think about Thanksgiving was that it was always at someone else's house, and they always had a really cool dog.
Right.
And
there you go.
I would just get to hang out with some stranger's dog. And that would be great for me. Honestly, that's probably the best way to spend any holiday or day, is just petting strangers' dogs.
With some animal somewhere, and no responsibility of how to clean this kitchen up. It's not my kitchen, and I'm also a child. There was a lot of manhunt happened afterwards, where the kids would like. It's funny looking back how, as a child, obviously your life doesn't revolve around beer, as it should not, and if it is, please alert somebody. But just kind of the kids like eat food. The kids run around outside, and the parents would be inside just enjoying beverages and stories and laughter, and a lot of manhunt. I remember there was one year my cousins, we found a bunch of stray cats in a barn. Like, it just gave birth to kittens, and that was a big deal. And lots of animal things happening. Interesting. But yeah, a lot of manhunt, a lot of getting tackled in muddy yards.
Can you just elaborate on what manhunt is for some of the listeners that maybe don't know?
Right, it's this fun game where we take the weakest person, give them a 5-second head start. It's like tag, but with teams, essentially, is how we played it. And there's also can be like a capture the flag version of it where you have 2 teams. Each team hides a flag somewhere, and the other team tries to find it, but you can tag that other team out when they're trying to steal your flag at any moment. So there's like jails set up that they sit in, and you can run to that jail if your cousins are stuck in there and free them from the jail by tagging them out of it. And I lived in the Northeast where everyone's house was on like 20 acres of land, and you could easily be like, this barn here is 1 base and a quarter mile away.
Across the grape vineyard.
Right, exactly right. And the other barn is the other base.
Snow on the ground.
Right, sure. Yeah, a lot of times there was. Or it was like a frozen ground. You could tackle it, and not to mud, but like to icy dirt, which was really felt great. You're kind of struggling for air and feeling your shoulder bruising in real time. But that was, part of growing up.
I often remember tag, hide and seek growing up into where it would be like some sort of terribly played football game
right.
On Thanksgiving with uncles that wished they were my age and me that wished I was older and older people that really shouldn't be playing.
Right.
It was just like the last chance we got to be active outside before the deep freeze.
Sure. Right.
Put us all inside for the rest of winter.
Yep. I do remember a lot of uncles who'd had too much to drink trying to run out for a post route and then grabbing their hip or their back and hearing the oh as they went down slowly to the ground.
That was 100% me this whole last couple of days.
Right. It's kind of looking into the future now, and you think back, you're like, that'll be me. So I'll be the guy that pulls the hamstring and shuts down Thanksgiving one day, but at least for a little while. But
while we're drinking and finishing this innocent gun, let's get to. I know Harrison and I have put together some of traditions that we have in the celebration of Thanksgiving or the autumn equinox. If you're not a Thanksgiving celebrator, we're just going to kind of talk through those as we continue to drink. But first, really exciting news coming from our sponsor today.
Look out, people.
Who is Untappd, the perhaps greatest beer social media that I've ever known. And we're doing something really cool today. On this episode, we've got the Untappd store.untappd.com, our sponsor for every episode. And in the spirit of Thanksgiving and Christmas shopping and shopping, we're actually just going to do a giveaway. And we're going to be giving away essentially cash money.
Look out.
So the way this goes, one lucky beer lover, ideally a podcast listener, is going to receive a $25 voucher to the Untappd merch store just in time for Christmas shopping or shopping for yourself. The idea is you'll be able to use this to get a gift, whether it's Christmas related or not, bought and shipped to you. At least or $25 to go towards anything.
Sure. There's lots of cool stuff in there, lots of new stuff in there. We talked about it a little bit last time, right? Some new glassware and sweatshirts and coasters. It's
beanie hats came in the other day, I think. And yes, Jared and Facebook group, we are bringing out some taster glasses early in 2020 as well.
Fantastic.
So to enter this giveaway, leave a comment on Untappd's Instagram post about this episode. We're going to link to it in the show notes. Go to Instagram, type Untappd. You'll see a post about this particular episode, number 63. I need you to go into that Instagram post, leave a comment, tag a friend, and use the hashtag drinking socially. That's all you have to do to enter, right, Harrison?
Yep, that's it. Yep, just go into that episode, leave a comment, tag a friend, and use the hashtag drinking socially, and they'll enter you to win this guy. And what's the timeline looking like on this right now?
So the way this is going to work, you have to put your Instagram post up before November 24th at 12 a.m. Eastern. That's midnight Eastern time. November 24th is going to be the Sunday after you listen to this. So get on Instagram, look for Untappd, follow us if you don't already. check out the Instagram post about this episode, tag a friend. We're going to put the details in the show notes for this episode. But basically what we're going to do is grab everybody's Instagram name. That'll be fun. We're going to go old school. We're going to write them down on a piece of paper.
Yes.
We're going to put them into an Untappd hat, and we're going to randomly select a Instagram handle, username.
Yeah.
Out of the hat. I'm going to take a picture of it. It'll go on the Facebook group, and that person's going to become the winner. We're going to announce the winner on the next episode of Drinking Socially, released on December 4th.
That's right. So get those comments in ASAP. Do it right now if you can, unless you're driving. Then please don't. But yeah, remember to do this when you get a moment. Because why not? It's just some free money sitting there. So go grab it.
Worst case scenario, me or Harrison will go in there and like your comment.
Right.
Best case scenario, you wind up with $25 to spend on yourself for Christmas.
That's right. The greatest gift of all, free money. Yeah, check it out. And of course, as always, you can still use the podcast code in the store as well. That's still going on, right, John?
Yeah.
Get 20% off.
Use it when you get your $25. Use a coupon code podcast. That'll save you another 20% off.
Sure, just give it ho, ho, ho. Look at us.
True. There's got to be a Christmas stout coming up in our future.
I think there is. I think we got it covered.
But in the meantime, tag us in social. If you want to get more aggressive, leave a iTunes or Apple Podcast review for this episode. Let us know what you like, what you don't like, what you wish we did more.
Yep.
And of course, Harrison and I value that feedback and try and act on it as soon as possible.
Yep. We read it all, so pop it in there and we'll check it out.
Moving on from that, let's get to some of these beer traditions.
Let's do it.
I'm really excited. We announced 2 episodes ago. We talked about brewing beer in a pumpkin.
We did.
And that kind of translates into the first topic on discussion. But Harrison, tell me about this pumpkin. Should it still be full of beer?
Right. If you still have a pumpkin full of beer, you probably should get rid of it because it's probably dangerous now. It's probably turned into some crazy alcohol. If you haven't looked in your closet for a while where that pumpkin has been, and you're realizing as I say this, oh no, that's been sitting in the hall closet for 3 weeks. Just quietly go in there and dispose of it. It's not good anymore. However, if you sat in there for like a week and transferred it out, it's probably good to drink now. So I'd love to kind of see some photos and pictures about that, talk about it at all, talk about if you didn't use the pumpkin, just made the beer without it. Cool. I mean, that's, as we said in the recipe, obviously fine and definitely going to be less of a hassle. But also, as I talked about, that's fun to do, especially this time of year, have a beer sitting in a pumpkin.
And if you missed that episode, it was episode number 61, Out of Our Gourds.
Mm-hmm. Out of our gourds.
Unintended.
Oh.
You can go to that episode still. In the show notes, there's a link to Harrison's homebrew recipe that he kind of penned down on how to brew a beer in a pumpkin.
Yeah, and it works anytime there's a pumpkin. So you can do it now. It's never too late to brew in a starchy fruit, vegetable. I'm not going to debate
gourd.
That. Gourd,
I believe.
That's fine. All right, great. Gourd. That makes sense.
Saved by the gourd.
That's another. Anyway, So I'd love to see those photos about it or stories about it or if it exploded and what that looks like because that's happening before. But it kind of brings us to, as the topic of homebrew has been brought up, some really cool stuff. We're doing this, in fact, a new thing we're doing today we've never done in the honor of homebrews itself. We're going to have a homebrew from one of you all out there on the podcast today. John's pouring it right now, and it's looking great. That's something we're doing new this week. Checking out some home-brewed beer, and we're enjoying. John, why don't you talk a little bit about this, what we got today, how this happened, the origin story, all that good stuff.
Yeah, great. So this was kind of serendipitous the way this happened, but some years ago, early on in my career here at Untappd, I was talking to somebody about Untappd for Business and putting a beer menu online. And he was a really cool guy, and he loved Untappd, and we kind of talked more about how many check-ins do you have and stuff. And, years go on, and now he's a father, and he's working a different job, but he's got a homebrew setup that he does himself. Him and a friend, they go by High Brewing, HYE, which is kind of actually it's Armenian, I believe, for Armenian. He explained it much better than I will. But this particular beer, I love it because it ties to he just so happened to ship it to me right as Harrison and I were trying to do an episode and talk about the traditions of homebrew.
Mm-hmm.
And so this one, amazing story. The beer itself is named Maddie's Meltdown.
I love it.
We're going to link to it in the podcast notes. You probably won't be able to find it anywhere, but if you are a home brewer, you should definitely create a homebrew Untappd page and keep track of your recipes and things you did good, things you wish you did better. But this particular beer comes from Elliot's homebrew, High Brewing, Maddie's Meltdown, which is named after his brand new daughter, Madison Ann. It was her first brew day. Such an awesome tradition. She was probably, I think, somewhere around like 6 or 7 months old.
Yeah.
Kind of shoveling hops into the boil. Elliot does an awesome job. Like, I think home brewing allows you to just say, I'm doing what I want here. So he's got 3 pounds of passion fruit puree and 15 habanero peppers, which scare the crap out of me.
Yeah, here we go.
Half of the peppers he added during the last 15 minutes of the boil, and the rest of them he added during the secondary fermentation. He also added Citra, Nugget, and Yukonot hops during the boil, and then did some dry hopping. This added a great bittering and aroma to this particular homebrew. Nice pepper up front. Just to kind of warn you that trouble is around the corner. And I'm reading this from
I love it.
His description of the beer on Untappd on his homebrew page. And Harrison, you kind of alluded to this earlier. Sometimes maybe the best beer in the world you've had can come from a home brewer. I mean, you can, I'll use mashed potatoes again. Like, you can get mashed potatoes at a great steak restaurant.
Right.
My mom also makes good mashed potatoes. I don't want her homebrew, but but there's no reason, if you love a particular style of beer, if you love a smoky Rausch beer, pick up a few simple ingredients and spend a weekend and just learn how to make them. You may end up making some of the best Rausch beer you've ever had.
Right, yeah. And it may not happen the first time you make it. That's important to know.
Fair point. That's a fair point to make.
But it is, I mean, home brewing, like all great hobbies, comes with its own investments. You want to get a nice setup and stuff. Doesn't need to be, you don't need a ton of stuff. Like, as I mentioned, the pumpkin episode, you don't need a ton to make good drinkable beer, but you can also, with a small investment, really make amazing beer. And some of the best beer I've ever had was brewed to this day by guys who made it in their barn or their garage, like truly the best. And I've had some of the best commercial beers that have ever existed too. So there's often time a knock or like a different people in the industry or people writing about the industry don't know it, kind of look at like homebrew and then commercial beers and is not being on the same level. And I would argue that the best of the best, whether it's made in some huge $1 billion brewery or in someone's garage, if it's really well made, it's good and it's good beer, and you do not need millions of dollars to do it. So with that, Maddie's Meltdown, looking at it, it looks amazing. I mean, it's crystal clear. You can see right through it. Awesome head on it.
It's got a little bit of color to it.
Right, great color. It's like ruby red. It's awesome.
Amazingly clear. The head comes out. I mean, this I should say, this comes to me in what used to be, it looks like a Pliny bottle.
Sure.
Wrapped up in duct tape with a handwritten label.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to talk about my first homebrew experience, but I've grown to get really excited whenever I see a bottle like this. And this particular beer, the nose on it smells like an amazing fruit salsa. Right. I mean that with compliment, Elliot, if you're listening.
Great way. You're right. It smells like a crazy mango salsa or something. Fruity salsa. You're right. All right, let's get in here. Ooh.
Holy cow.
Tons of habanero, but not, and then it's,
man.
The fruit. That's cool. It's like 15 habanero peppers. I'd love to know how big his system is, kind of get a guesstimate on
What, 3 pounds of passion fruit puree. Good Lord.
And yeah, that's a lot of passion fruit, but also 15 habanero peppers, obviously pretty hot peppers.
This beer is a journey in as I taste it.
Right.
The habaneros they're there 100%. They're there,
Sure.
They're shouting, but they're not aggressive.
Right.
They're just, it's
not
like a gentle
uncomfortable
burn.
at all. Right. Yeah, it's kind of sitting there nicely on my tongue right now, but this is cool as heck. And I'm a tough sell on pepper beers. I feel like the ones that I've had have been there to like shock and awe you and terrify you into never drinking again. But this one is not that at all. It all
passion
works well
fruit
together.
Is a really nice balance. If it were purely habanero, I would have said like, yeah, that's for shock value maybe. Excuse me, but the passion fruit that is in there, I don't know which one I'm tasting more of, whether it's the kind of sweet fruit or that gentle. This man, Elliot, this is great.
You did it. 9.2%, 83 IBUs too. And yeah, dry hopping this, but I'm getting, it's just like a dance of the passion fruit and habaneros. That's just fantastic. Well done. Yeah, I mean, this is again case in point, and we looked at some of the pictures that are on his brewery page to kind of get a feel for the system he's working with and how big it might be. But it's stuff, anyone who wants to approach brewing can get to a level where they're making really great beer. With time and work and all that stuff, but it's fun. I mean, that's the reason why home brewing is such an addictive and popular kind of hobby. Is that it's there is few things as satisfying as drinking a beer you have made. Like I remember the first time I did that, it was from the guy who's kind of my godfather. We'll do a quick Harrison origin story. Harrison the brewer anyway, which does tie in with the holiday season a bit. So my origin story, my kind of introduction to home brewing started on a holiday break from school and college. I was a college-age young man, went to a neighborhood holiday party, met up at a friend's house from high school, his parents' house, and lived right down the road from me. And one of his neighbors showed up with a bunch of jugs, as I saw them, which I now know to be growlers of
the
beer.
First time you see them, they are jugs.
Right, they're just jugs. And he is a large kind of house of a man. His name is Tom McClenovic, and Tom Mick. He's kind of well known in certainly Connecticut, but New England brewing world. He's published a few recipes out there and in some books, being interviewed, and one of them being Beer Captured, which is really great. Homebrew book that has a lot of fantastic recipes in it. But there was Tom McClenovic in the room walking in with these jugs of beer, and I was kind of like, what's happening? What's going on here? Where did you? And I, in my dumbness, was kind of like, where did you buy this? As I'm sitting there drinking it, and he's like, yeah, try this. He's like, I didn't buy it anywhere. I made it right over there. Kind of pointed over his shoulder at this big red barn I could see kind of across the yard that was in his house there in his backyard. And I was like, holy cow, this is wild. At the time I was studying biology and all this stuff, and a college student who loved beer and was like, wow, the two worlds can meet. And he's a civil engineer by trade, and every guy he brews with is like a bioengineer. So it's very science-based, which got me kind of excited about it. And yeah, a week or two later, I was in his garage at 8 a.m. on a Saturday, moving kegs around and heating up water. And I remember the first time I brewed, it was like 8:30 in the morning, but probably still almost, might have been earlier than that. It was still dark out. And he hands me a half pint of his award-winning, many times over, Imperial Stout. But I think his clock's in around like 10% or something. There's a great recipe for it online. And puts on an ELO record. And because he's probably in his 60s now. And we're just blasting this at 8 a.m, setting up for the brew day, drinking a big old beer. And I was like, this is it. This is the life for me. I'm hooked. This is the life for me. But he was for a while the most celebrated kind of home brewer in the state of Connecticut, won more awards than any other single person, and part of this really cool storied group called the Underground Brewer Society of Connecticut, also known as the Yahoos, which stood for the Yankee Association of Homebrewers Opposed to Organized Societies.
Perfect.
So classic dad humor at work all over the place here. And interestingly enough, founded by Pat Baker, that group was, who went on to found the BJCP too. So lots of history there.
Pretty substantial,
but right. So that's
resume.
Right.
There.
So I was lucky. So it's kind of like one of those stories we accidentally stumble upon, like perhaps one of the most at that time like educated group of homebrewers in the country, and they've been around since the 70s, making beer a year or two before actually it was even legalized to do by President Carter. So that's a whole other story that I don't have much info on. But anyway, so yeah, my origin story was that. It was kind of like, in a barn making beer, but he won tons of awards, and rightfully so. I mean, the beer that I had there, the first beer we brewed together was a clone of Aventinus's Weizenbach or Doppelweizenbach, and it was amazing. And I mean, we bottled it up, a couple weeks later, and it's to this day one of the best beers I've ever had. His Imperial Stout's amazing. So again, like I've experienced it. We're experiencing it today with Elliot's beer. You don't have to be a professional brewer to make beer that's exciting to drink and just really, really well made. I've seen it, experienced it a ton. So don't let it slow you down. But this is great.
A little bit of science, a little bit of soup kettle. But definitely, so Pat Baker is the guy that founded the Yahoos, and then later went on to found the BJCP, the Beer Judging Certification Program.
Right.
Like it kind of makes sense when you think about it. I feel like homebrewers always get a rap for like they're the minor leagues,
right?
We're playing in the major leagues here, but every brewer, one of the brewers I respect most here in Wilmington, North Carolina, was, before he opened his brewery, was part of a homebrew club, and they would do meats and tastes and everything. I mean, that's kind of where you at least learn to theorize and build beers, and then the hard part would probably just be scaling that recipe.
Right.
But
yeah, I mean that is a good So it is very. The science is the same, but like doing it, how do you run a commercial brewery compared to the brewery in your garage is very different, but that's like the easy stuff that can be taught to almost anyone. I mean, all this stuff can be learned by almost anybody, but the science itself and scaling that recipe up, that's where the real work, the recipe itself is where the work is. Scaling it is easy, and then learning how to run a commercial brewery, anybody can do that. So yeah, it's, again, this is awesome. I'm so pumped that Elliot sent this over. It's great. I mean, it's like this is great. It tastes. I would not know. I would buy this in the store. I would drink it on tap, and I would say, "This is fantastic. What a cool beer!
This is a really exciting beer. I hope
Not
they
even
do it
like
again.
What a cool beer for a home brew. Like this is just this is great."
It tastes like a beer that I would only get to have once. And unfortunately, in this case, that's true.
That's true. But you're right. It tastes like something some brewery would release for like their anniversary beer. It's just really cool and different.
Elliot's background, I've never actually had a pint with him. We just kind of met through Untappd, but he's got a culinary background, which for me is really exciting. You got brewers like Mad Chef in Pennsylvania that do these kind of culinary influenced beer, and I think that's really exciting. You can kind of see it here with the passion fruit and habanero. He does a lot of beers with peanut butter in it. If I had my way, every beer would taste like peanut butter and jelly. Maybe not. I'd probably change my mind. But but homebrewing allows you to do that.
Right.
You say like, no, I wish I had more jelly. I wish I had Concord grape jelly. You can build it.
You can do it
with permission from your family and a smallish investment. And generally get a friend to come over and
couple
help.
Friends, a younger friend to help lift all the heavy stuff. That was me for a while. I was the younger.
Find a Harrison.
A young me and all the stuff.
My first homebrew story is nowhere near as celebrated as Harrison's, but kind of similar. I was at a Buffalo Bills tailgate near where I grew up. I was probably just about the drinking age.
Sure.
And I remember, kind of learning how a tailgate was like how does tailgating work? Like you don't really tailgate as an underage person in the U.S., or at least maybe you don't.
Underage person
technically,
anywhere. Right?
And so I'm showing up, and there's somebody cooking chili over a giant fire in a parking lot, and there's people running around selling necklaces that light up. And we decided we're just going to like throw the football, and we got a tiny little charcoal grill, and we're going to cook some hot dogs on it and just get ready for the game before it snows. And these Canadian guys, which is Canada's border and Buffalo are like a 10-minute drive away.
Right.
These Canadian guys come up and ask if they can toss the football with us. And they're nice as all get up, and they're Bills fans. So we just toss the football. You guys want some dogs? And they drag over this archaic looking cooler and they pop the top, and there's a bunch of beers in it, which is great because at the time you couldn't buy beer on Sunday in New York. So we didn't think that through, and we only had about 12 beers for 4 or 5 people.
Right.
So that we were really grateful. And I went in, I grabbed one of the bottles of beers, and the label was ripped off, and there was like a marker on it, and the bottle cap was different than anything I'd ever seen.
Right.
I said, what do you guys do in Canada? What
is this?
Why does this beer look like you bought it at a thrift store? And the guy says, oh, we make our own. Right. And I said, what are you, magical?
Right.
And I wish, I can't remember if the Bills won that day. I can't remember any of their names.
Right.
I just remember coming home and not even talking about the Bills game, just being like, there were these Canadians, they make their own beer, they make it themselves. How?
Do you understand what I'm saying?
And it was great. I mean, it tasted, if I could compare it in memory, it was the first time I think I remember a beer tasting somewhat sweet and malty and thinking like, man, you guys you've got it figured out.
Right.
And I didn't even know what homebrewing was. Beer was just this giant corporation.
Sure. Yeah.
That sponsored football commercials.
That's right.
And that was my first introduction to it. And it was years and years later before I ever got the idea that maybe I could try it as well. But forever, you 3 random Canadians, if you happen to be listening, John the Bills fan says thank you.
Thank you for that, for sharing your beer with him. That's a great story. I feel like there's a lot. That's the discovery of that. Everyone has kind of this story of discovering craft beer, but a lot of people have this story of discovering homebrewed beer, and probably more and more of those stories now than ever. And it's I'm glad we have both have memorable ones, which is great. But this is cool. So what else we got here, John? We got a lot of more stories, more things.
Perhaps
to share.
an easier segue than I had initially planned. We were planning on talking about sports traditions, and how those relate to beer. Mine, I'll try and walk you through really quickly. I've already mentioned that I'm a Buffalo Bills fan. And for the course of my life, they've had a losing record. There was a time in the early 90s where they were really good, but ultimately lost, as I'm sure most people know. For the last 10 years, they've been really not good. So it's great. As a Bills fan, as a Buffalo Bills American football fan, beer and football go together very well. But that also kind of translated to, I mean, anytime football is always on Thanksgiving, you drink beer, there's a social aspect to beer. When I was in the Army, we would, almost every Saturday, we would get together and play flag football. Here in the States, Saturday belongs to college football. In the Army, college football doesn't mean anything. So we would just play flag football and kind of pretend we were in the NFL. Horrible as we were, the main reason is that we would all just kind of bring beer from where we were from. The Pennsylvania guys would bring Yingling. The West Coast guys would talk about how they couldn't get their beer wherever we were. But it was this great kind of camaraderie. I remember sports and playing football when I was in school. Kind of the first time, like I had a really cold, long football game and taking a hot bath as I got home and drink like 3 Advil instead of the typical 2. And grabbing a beer and just feeling kind of like a Viking, which is really funny if you've ever seen me, because I'm definitely not a Viking. And then in my older age, kind of as I grow up and I play a little bit less sports, I see a lot of times like you'll see like a beer in 5K or a beer
Right.
run or beer in yoga and stuff. And I'm almost always going to be right at the tap room when those finish.
Right.
I'm just,
Right.
just ready for everybody to come in. I'll just get a good seat early.
Yep.
But I think there's definitely there's a competition, there's a celebration involved in sports.
Sure.
And there's a kind of a group, a team, a unity that the beer really lends itself to. I know Harrison, we talked about it before. Poor guy is not a Bills fan,
Nope.
but
Right.
But Harrison, what's your kind of sports and beer tradition?
Yeah, so forever before beer came into the picture in high school, it would just be the turkey bowl at the high school. People get, I think it was members of the soccer and lacrosse teams get together and play and turn into like kind of a mud bowl just to wear ourselves out before eating a lot of turkey that later that day. We kind of get up early in the morning and do it. And now we do. I'm not in the tap room, but I'm kind of watching my wife run the turkey trot while I opt out of it. So the days of running around before I eat a bunch of food, for now are, I guess, a little bit on hold for a bit. But yeah, more the less the playing and more the watching. There's every Thanksgiving, tons of football on in the States that day, usually about 3 games. And so you kind of have that on in the background while you're eating food or making food, or kids are running around and getting into trouble, and your dad's passed out on the couch already, and something's burning in the kitchen. Lots of great kind of sense memories there, and smoke alarms going off and being yelled at to get outside because I'm in the way. And now I get to do the yelling, which is fun. Although I'm more of the sleeping on the couch. I think that's my role. But in college, it was kind of a mixture of where I am now and where I was, where I'd get home and sometimes there'd be a turkey bowl. Sometimes there wasn't, but there was almost always the Sam Adams seasonal in the fridge, which used to be, I think it was like 12 different beers, and Lord Fezziwigs is what was in there.
I remember that.
That was a good beer.
Yep.
They had the cherry wheat ale was in there every year. They had a couple, I think they had some kind of porter they did that might have had some spruce or something in it. But again, in New England, Sam Adams was kind of everywhere. It was less craft beer, more of just beer, and more of just a regional beer that everybody drank, which is kind of cool. And there are a lot of breweries that have that same, not a lot, but a fair amount, I guess, of breweries that have that same kind of association you find. But in history to it, the ones that have been around for a bit longer. But yeah, so we drinking those and stealing them from my parents, not from a store, but from my
Thanks.
in the college age, just kind of sneaking one or two there or not, and just kind of drinking them all when no one was looking, and wondering where all the beer went when they went to grab one themselves. Someone else in my family. That Yingling Porter is a great beer. Going to college in Pennsylvania, Yingling itself was always all over the place, but their porter is kind of this unsung hero they make, I think, all the time, as is their Black and Tan, another great, which I think is just their porter and their lager blended together, but they package that in 6-packs, another great option for something a little bit darker. But that's what I kind of gravitated to in the college years. And now it's a lot of the seasonal releases, whether it's Blizzard of Hops from Trogs or other things like that. There are lots of great beers that get released this time of year, bigger stouts that get released by certain breweries that I'll definitely kind of sit on and enjoy after I have a bunch of food. But that's kind of the goal, is to fill up as much as possible on food so that I could consume as much beer as possible and have the food be that nice wall that slows it all down, so I can keep consuming it. But it's easily one of my favorite days, and would always end Thanksgiving itself with a viewing of National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation to kind of kick off that part of the year, which is a hilarious movie. If you haven't seen it, you should. But we watch it every year, and still we would all laugh at it, and like we'd never seen it before. And that's a rare movie that does that. And obviously the occasion itself and the beer and the turkey probably had a lot to do with the laughing. But yeah, it's some of the fond memories there. That always come up, and I'm excited to repeat every year, even though it's I know it's coming and know what's going to happen pretty much. it's still enjoyable.
Ben Franklin, beer is proof that God loves us.
That's right.
And
wants us to be happy.
Beer is also enough of a social lubricant for me to watch a 30-year-old movie with my family and enjoy it.
Just watch Chevy Chase fall off the roof a bunch. That never gets old.
Speaking of sports, right? Hanging up the Christmas lights.
That's right.
Just wanted to send one shout out to Facebook group member Stacy. She ran her, I think, first 5K and posted. It wasn't a beer 5K, but she found a way to incorporate it into that, and I'm pretty sure she made it through swimmingly. That's a bad choice of words for a run. Joggingly. And one thing I wanted to mention in kind of doing some research into beer sports, there's a whole bunch of things that come up there.
Yeah.
Beer pong is probably most known here in the States. In Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, probably there's kind of a tradition that they use a beer crate run. And I love this idea, and I'm sure that I'm going to see it happen here in the States very soon and be jealous I'm not a part of it. Essentially, it's a team. I'm going to say Harrison and I, although we're not going to make any good time.
One good knee between the two of us.
Haven't even gotten started yet. But so it's where two people carry a crate or a case of beer over 10 kilometers, and you can't finish until the beer is gone.
Oh,
So
man.
you also have to drink the case of beer with your teammate as you carry it 10 kilometers.
That's interesting.
I mean, there's strategies. Do we drink it all right now and then run with an empty case?
Yes. Yes, you do, John.
We've already won.
Right. Yeah, at that point, you get as far as you can until you pass out. That doesn't really matter. But yeah, I mean, that's interesting that literally the case gets lighter as you drink more, which should make it easier, but you're also drunkers, which of course makes it harder.
I get really strong when I've drank too much beer, but not actual strong. Just
imaginary.
It only
strong.
lives in my head.
Right, exactly right.
I couldn't run around the block after a case of beer.
A lot of grunting and huffing and puffing. Probably a lot of groaning and then a lot of sitting and then...
Yep. We're going to finish the race tomorrow. Not tomorrow. I'll be hungover.
Right. Some light Ubering there and then a celebration. But that's, that'd be, 10 kilometers. Kind of
in the States, we'd have, this is Germany and Austria and Switzerland. In the States, it'd be a 5K.
Right.
And probably a 6-pack.
Right.
But
I like that version.
Yeah, we could figure out a way to, a sixtel. Carry a 6-barrel.
Right. Iron Man and a half keg. That'd be, we'd all drown in the water part. Everyone would just go under.
Yeah, that would.
That wouldn't work well. Only one of those would happen. Oh man. Love. It is. It's kind of funny thing to combine sports and drinking, and I mean that literally. It is kind of funny to watch. Often. I mean, Dizzy Bat is kind of the classic.
Revenge of the Nerds, Dizzy Bat.
I played many a time.
I played Dungeons and Dragons with beer a lot. I know that's not anybody listening. Their eyebrows just went way up. Dungeons and Dragons is getting cool again, but it is not a sport.
Right, it is a game, not a sport.
There's no matter how many times you roll the dice, it is really not that physical, but it's fun.
It is.
And there's traditions there too. But moving to our last bullet point on traditions, I don't know how much of a tradition this may be, but kind of beer nostalgia.
Right.
And first beers. I always have a different answer when you ask me what my first beer memory was. We ask a lot of people that join the Facebook group, what's your first beer memory?
Yeah.
And it's usually a 50-50 split between a really, really cool story and I don't remember. Which is both of them I accept. It's fun reading the stories, but I don't blame you if you don't remember. There's so much regional, in the States, your first legal beer memory probably comes around the time you're in college or university. Today, there's breweries that partner with universities and make beers, like literally to support. There's Old Tuffy for North Carolina State. There's a beer that Brian from the Facebook group was telling me about that's made for a college. There's minor and Major League Baseball team collaborations. Bud Light put your team on our beer. I think last year they had every NFL team, and they'd put the team logo on the beer and distribute it regionally.
I remember that. Yep. That's right.
For me, I mean, my beer memory goes back to high school, like Bud Light, Labatt Blue, Yingling sometimes. Like I kind of remember sometimes a warm Milwaukee from a backpack if I was fortunate enough to grab one. Not really knowing one of the first beer memories I have that always comes up is Abita's Purple Haze.
Yeah.
I remember drinking that and just wondering like what kind of secret magic happened to this beer.
Right.
The one I'm most hopeful that the entire staff at New Belgium is listening to is the first time I had Coco Mole from their Lips of Faith series. And it was the first time I had like a mole, a Mexican spiced chocolate stout. I don't even think it was a stout, but it was chocolate. And there were like cinnamon and some, whatever goes into a mole that eludes me at this point. Coco Mole from New Belgium was one of those beers that I remember having and saying like, there's culinary influence here. Ballast Point's Indra Canindra, to some might sound horrible, but the coconut, curry, cumin, coriander, that beer was a great curry.
Yeah, absolutely.
For me, those are most of my first beer memories are the ones that like just kind of came out of nowhere. Elliot's beer here. This is something like I've never tasted before. This is really fun. It's an adventure. I agree. Those I think are the ones that create memories.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right there. For me, I have again obviously spoken about this before on the cast of the Newcastle Brown Ale being my Nuki Browns being the kind of one of my first memories, and then tons of Yingling in college. And I think I've shared the craft beer. My first kind of, maybe I haven't, craft beer stories was from Dogfish Head's April Hop, which they don't make anymore, unfortunately, but it was a spring seasonal. They used to release every like April 1st or something like that. And I was lucky in college to have a roommate who had an older brother.
Nice.
Who would visit us all the time. And every time bring a case to a beer. Great man.
Awesome guy.
He really was. And he was like 7 feet tall. So every time, and hilarious. And every time he'd come, he'd just create a lot of trouble. But no one would want to like approach him about it because he was huge, like a giant.
And he brought you beer.
Right. So no one really messed with him. And he was hilarious. And I was like messing with other people. But brought April Hop. Probably back in like 2006 or 7 or so. It was the first time I had it. I was like, holy cow. And it was so hoppy and bitter. It was bitter. It was also hoppy. The apricots kind of came right through. And I remember thinking like, holy cow, this is a beer. Like there's so much flavor here.
Yes.
And so much going on in this that I wasn't expecting, didn't know existed. Like that was definitely like my awakening moment of like, holy cow. And I was a sophomore in college or so. I was young in my college years where usually you're drinking, something silver out of a box or a trash can, as I've also explained in my anyway, vessels are not important. But it's what's inside that matters. But it should be a t-shirt. It shouldn't be a t-shirt.
It might be a t-shirt.
It might be a t-shirt. But anyway, yeah, and that was definitely like the awakening for me, and having floated around with other different outside of the American Light Lager box things like Newcastle Brown Ale was great, but that was the moment where I was like, oh boy, this is a game changer. And really from that point on, my college experience is kind of like, yep, let's grab that case of something weird, but let's all like something simple, but let's also get like a 6-pack or a 12-pack, or sometimes we get like a case of something. It was usually Dogfish Head. Going to school outside of Philadelphia, Dogfish Head was everywhere, being located in like 2 hours away from where I went to school. It was always really fresh and kind of in there. I don't know if you'd say heyday, or certainly like when everyone was freaking out about them. They were published in all kinds of magazines about, I think
they were paving the road a lot.
Really, too. Like the 90 Minute was like the best IPA in the world for a while, and rightfully so. And we'd save up that cakes of that probably cost like, I don't know, $60
5
or
times
whatever,
more than
which
whatever
was
else you were
ridiculous.
drinking. Yeah.
But I remember we got it one day. It was like a hot late April, early May day, and we got it and played volleyball all day and drank that beer, and I think we went to the mess hall and maxed out our like credits for that day of like, I'll have a cheeseburger and a pizza. Just sitting there inhaling it all, kind of just, playing with fire all afternoon and exhausted from being out in the sun and drinking 90 minutes. But so anyway, but yeah, that beer, Aprihop, opened me up to everything and made me a lifelong Dogfish Head fan. But and just that when you have that, and I'm sure that's what we're asking about when we have that, when you enter the group, that story of like that moment where everything changes, that kind of turning point where the world is before and after that. Love to hear about it because I definitely have one. I mean, Jon has them, like a lot of people do, where the big reason why you probably found Untappd happened a while before that when you found some really cool beer that made you want to find out more about that and just opened up that curiosity in you. So mine was Aprihop. Thankful for that, and for older brothers and bringing beers and educating, passing the torch on, if you will.
The kindness of family and those old enough to purchase beer. Right. But absolutely, and please do let us know. Usually I'll share some stories from our Facebook group, which is kind of Harrison and I's best way to one, to really keep in touch with some really cool people and just see. There's been some amazing shares for Stout Day. We got a lot of great pictures.
Yeah, that was awesome. Yes, so many pictures.
Football got some pictures. Somebody had a picture of Sam Adams' Utopias, which really made me jealous. And we actually went in on a bottle of it, Harrison and I and some extra friends. So Brian won't get to drink it for the podcast because we had to share it with about 8 other people. But the Facebook group is great. There's I think most commonly I see people asking for advice when they travel, and it's always really cool to see. I'll try and shout out a couple of recommendations. Somebody was going to Brian was going to Indianapolis, and I said, yes. Sun King, check out Daredevil, check out Kuma's, and somebody else commented and said, like, yeah, Daredevil, there's a go-kart track right next door. Like, that was really cool. This is the type of advice you can't generally Google.
Right.
But the point of this, one bit of feedback we got from the Facebook group comes from Jared, who said, hey, I kind of liked the way you guys used to do news clips or little bits of news about the craft brew world. And there's been some pretty cool stuff that's happened in the last couple of days here. So,
absolutely.
Jared, thanks for the advice. There's a couple of likes on there. So Harrison and I are going to jump right in. Harrison's going to talk about some pretty big news in the craft beer world, and hopefully I can add to that.
Yeah, exactly right. So on I believe it was the 12th, might have been the 11th of November, AB InBev, so Anheuser-Busch, bought the Craft Brew Alliance, or CBA as it's commonly referred to. And as the name suggests, it's an alliance of a bunch of breweries, namely Hawaii's Kona Brewing Company, Oregon's Widmer Bros Brewing, Washington's Red Hook, Florida's Wynwood Brewing Company, Massachusetts Cisco out on Nantucket, North Carolina's Appalachian Mountain Brewery, and then the gluten-free brewery Omission, a Square Mile Cider Company, and then the PH Experiment, which is a brand incubator for CBA. So that's all part of CBA and now owned by InBev. They used to own about 30% of it, had a deal with them a couple of years ago, and then essentially, when the timing was right for them, just bought the rest up and now own all of it. So really interesting. A lot of those breweries that I just mentioned that's part of CBA have been around for a while. A lot of them are looked at as kind of pioneers. I grew up drinking a ton of Cisco's pale ale. It's called Whale's Tail Pale Ale. That was like everywhere. And Appalachian Mountain Breweries, their Bodie Odie or Pale Ale, great beer.
Oat Pale Ale from North Carolina, out in the west of North Carolina, but great. Those guys are a great brewery.
Yep, Kona. I love Kona. Everything, all their bottles, and they make really solid beer. So, anyways, this is a big deal to have. All these breweries also be joining AB's pretty impressive, growingly more and more, especially after they bought out Cleveland's Platform Beer Company in August of this year too. adding there. So just kind of big news, obviously, when anything like this happens. And, breweries kind of change ownership. There are lots of questions. What's next? Obviously, we'll see. But there's been a relationship there for a while between all these breweries and InBev. And really, at the end of the day, most of the time, it's just about just distribution. Like, how can we get more places? How can we expand our footprint? I'll partner up with the biggest, really, distributor of beer in the world, which is InBev. So, but yeah, it was big to see, and curious about what will happen next. But hopefully, it just means more beer for people who can't get it. Although there was some fair amount of kind of noise made about the fact that Kona has a seltzer brand and hard seltzer, which is growing like crazy.
Holy cow, seltzers! It's definitely been a good year for seltzer beer.
Right, White Claw, Truly, all that stuff that you've probably seen a lot of, and your friends checking it on Untappd, and maybe you enjoyed some yourself. Great, but Kona has a hard seltzer as this platform, I believe. So that certainly, in that same vein, Miller Coors made a big announcement this about 2 weeks ago, saying they were kind of doing some restructuring and also wanted to focus on, in so many words, more on the hard seltzer, which is growing like, gangbusters. So very interesting. So again, lots of kind of moving pieces. Too early to say anything at all, but certainly of note, and something we'll kind of keep an eye on here and see what happens next. The hope is that just more beer starts flowing that was perhaps harder to find. I mean, I for one would love to get some platform. Love to see Cisco Whale's Tail Pale Ale more often.
Have some more of Elliot's beer.
I knew it. Yeah, but very cool. They're very interesting.
I know there's definitely opinions on ABI's acquisition of breweries, and I remember when they acquired Wicked Weed. Which was kind of like the shining star for North Carolina. Sure. That news caught me off guard, and I felt like I was in a political battle on Facebook with friends. And I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's important to remember that some people brew beer for the passion and the love. Some people brew beer for the business. Some people fall in between. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, it's still a great time to be drinking it.
Yeah.
So my hope is that if this acquisition is beneficial, then that means that Red Hook and Kona and then they start to see their sales improve.
Yeah.
So hopefully that's good for all the people that work there as well.
Yeah, and one of the articles read about it. The CEO of CBA, Andy Thomas, is going to be there at least through 2021. That's like as long as his current contract is running, so that's not going to change anytime soon. And then their chief financial and strategy officer, who used to be New Belgium CEO, Christine Parrish, is also going to be there too, attached to CBA. So again, a lot of the times, I mean, when you think about it, and this isn't always the case, but if you're acquiring a company, it's because you like what they're doing, and that's attached to the people that are already working there. So I think it's pretty rare, although it does happen, but rare certainly in the beer world, to kind of clean house and you grab a new brewery or series of breweries. It wouldn't really make too much sense, since you're assumingly buying something that you like and you like because it's run well.
Doing well, yeah. Right. The brand is one part of it, but I think the beer, of course I'm viewing this from my lens, right? Mm-hmm. I value the beer more than the brand, I think, but I don't know. Yeah. That's a discussion we have maybe at a different date. Like, I trust New Belgium to make a good beer, so I'm okay buying them wherever I am in the world.
Yes.
And then some breweries I know, like if it's a high ABV beer, I might look specifically for Avery first or something like. But I think brand's important. I don't know what I was trying to say there.
No, you're right. Yeah. And again, the relationship between ABI and CBA has been there for a long time. So a lot of people thought this was just inevitable, and kind of surprised it didn't happen earlier. So in this case, not much may change, but definitely was noteworthy and got people talking when that happened in the office the other day. So I wanted to share with you guys. We'd love to hear your feedback on it as well in the group, on social. However you want to reach out to us if you have some insights we may have missed or a different take on it. Let us know, and we'll read all the stuff you guys write and comment on.
And for those of you that are woodworkers, I'm going to dovetail off of Harrison's initial bullet point. and bring up something that's kind of the same but different. But Brewbound hosts a live event in Santa Monica, California, early in December. And so their winter event, Brewbound, is actually presented by the CBA, the Craft Brew Alliance. I think it's a really cool industry event. For me, with a business background, I kind of love the focus on what they do here, which they call Pitch Slam.
Ooh.
And I mean, kind of think of it as like Shark Tank for a brewery. Basically, what you do is you can apply and enter to be in this pitch contest where you're going to be kind of vetted. And eventually, if you make it through, you're going to be pitching your brewery or cider or canned cocktails or kombucha or whichever kind of idea you have that falls in that realm.
Right.
You're going to be pitching it to a panel of incredible background, like people from the CBA, financial backers. There's going to be venture capitalists that are watching this, so very much like Shark Tank.
Yeah.
And I think what's really cool, aside from I think the business of it is really exciting. But this competition has been held for years, and previous winners are like Miami's Winwood, Braxton Brewing out of Ohio, AMB, At Mountain Brewing out of North Carolina. We were just talking about Nova Brazil recently. And what I think is cool is it just kind of, I drink beer and I have fun drinking beer, but I love to break down all the walls, whether it be Canadians showing me what homebrew is or kind of learning in a huge commercial brewery what is involved in making a successful brewery versus one that has to fold. And a lot of these guys are in the really early stages, and they're getting advice from people that have launched one or two successful breweries before and have some really valuable feedback.
Yeah.
And they make some of the previous pitch videos available on their website. We'll link to it in the show notes. But I think it's, again, I kind of nerd out. I think it's really exciting. You've got like partners from Wormtown that are judging this. You got directors of innovation that are judging this. So I think it's an exciting opportunity to just kind of get a sneak peek into where trends are going, who's going to be a new successful brewery, and what their ideas are, where the financial backing is willing to spend the money and support. So a lot of that stuff. Sorry if that got a little bit nerdy, but again, I think that the business side of beer is or can be somewhat exciting, and usually not the part anybody talks about.
Right, but the first part, and obviously the most important part. If you want to keep being open as a brewery, you have to, know what you're doing as a business. You can't be buying all the hops just because you want to, and then find out, we don't have money to keep the lights on. So that is important to have at least understanding of that, and to meet with people in this industry that do. It's great. But this looks like a pretty impressive event. And the alumni alone who have won, it's like some pretty serious breweries. So clearly, if you are thinking about this or have some ideas, people who do and they don't know about this event, you can register for it still, I'm pretty sure. And like John said, we'll link to it in the show notes. But
registration will be over by the time you're listening. But the event itself is going to be December 4th or 5th. We'll put a link to their website just so you can kind of check out. I don't know if they'll live stream the final pitches, but there's usually going to be a YouTube recap, which is, just drink a beer and kind of take a listen at what people are pitching as the future of craft brew.
Right. But this looks cool. I did not know about it till today. And it's, again, for fans of Shark Tank and beer, now you have
beer
something
tank.
You can, right, that's the thing already. They should have called it that, though. That would have been, oh, boy. Cool.
Well, for those of you that listened along, thanks so much for making it through the show. Remember, if you're listening to this, it's before November 24th at midnight. Go to Untappd on Instagram. Go to Instagram, look for Untappd, and tag a friend. use the hashtag drinking socially. That's all you have to do. We're going to write down your Instagram name. We're going to pick from a hat. There might be 300. There might be 20.
Right.
Your chances are unknown, but the prize is a free $25 in the Untappd store. And you'll get to hear Harrison say your name in 2 weeks.
Ooh, yes. All right. Exciting.
Other than that, the show notes with the contest rules and the link to the Brewbound event and Elliot's beer and everything are going to be available at podcast.untappd.com. Spotify or iTunes or wherever you listen, they should be translated over there as well. If you have any questions or feedback, let us know on social media. Connect with Untappd on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram, or directly with Harrison and me at facebook.com/drinkingsocially.
Yeah, we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Cheers.
Cheers.